Okay, well, it's another Tuesday, another CFP ranking, and you know what that means, another Pac-12 Happy Hour presented by Dr. Pepper, Yogi Roth, Ashley Adamson back with you, and we have some things to talk about, Yogs. Some things happened this weekend. Yes, they did. All right.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the credit. I think that I felt like Utah was going to win that game. I don't think myself or anyone predicted 38-7 on Saturday night at Rice Eccles. So hats off to the Utes, first and foremost. Oregon, with the loss, dropping from number 3 to number 11 in the rankings. Utah moving up to number 19. We'll talk about the Ducks because it was obviously a disappointing weekend for them, but they still got a lot to play for. Explain to me, though, Yogi, how could anyone watch what Utah did to Oregon on Saturday and believe that there are 18 teams in the country better than them right now?
I'm with you, and especially when you look what Tavion Thomas did after being out in the previous game. You know, it's supposed to be a clean slate every week when the committee gets together, and they vote in clusters, right? So they look at a few teams, and then they vote on them, then look at the next set of teams, and they work their way all the way down to the top 25. And I'm with you. And in the cluster where Utah is right now, I bet there was a lot of dialogue around should they be higher than Wisconsin. The BYU thing's tough. Like, I get Cam Rising wasn't playing, but you know, they did lose the ball game. So I could see that, but I look at all the way up to 11 because they did what you're referencing at Oregon. If Utah was playing any of those teams on a neutral site, I'd be hard pressed to say who would take the other team. The way that they played last week, and then up until the Arizona game, it wasn't clean. But they have another opportunity this weekend. They're going to be in the Pac-12 title. I think if I'm a Ute fan, you know what you're playing for. You're playing for a chance to go to the Rose Bowl, a chance to win the Rose Bowl, and I keep comping them to SC. When Sam Darnold became the quarterback midway through the season, his first start was in Salt Lake City in a loss to Utah. Then they went on a run and beat Penn State. They finished in the top 5. Right, so I think there's a Utah thing with you look at the players potentially coming back next year for this program. If they go win their next 3 games, these rankings, it will be a very, 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 very distant memory.
Exactly. Good point. I remember Kyle Whittingham telling us a few weeks ago that the next step in the process for his program, they've now been to the Pac-12 championship game 3 times, but the next step is for them to win it. So who do you think they want? Because there's 3 teams still in play. Of course there is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, probably Oregon State, I would say. I called that game, Ash, on our network, and the Beavs owned the line of scrimmage that night. And since then, no one has owned the line of scrimmage against Utah other than the Utes. So I'd imagine that's what they want. I think either way, it's going to be a great story. I think playing the same team twice in a couple weeks, which of course would be the Ducks, there's something to that positive carryover of game plan. There's also the obvious of that score and what you're going to see from the Oregon Ducks. So I think regardless of who they play, you're right. They nailed it. Not only did they not win those games, but they didn't have a lot of success after those games, right? You look at, they're up for the CFP. We were talking about that earlier off air. They went and lost their bowl game. So I think managing all of this for them is something that this team has done well this season as they've really grown as the season has gone on. They were not a sexy pick to win the South, and here they are sitting as the South champs with 1 regular season game left.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And for Kyle Whittingham to become the all-time winningest coach in program history with that win was poetic. So again, hats off to everybody in that program. And I know their fan base is enjoying that and enjoyed Saturday night thoroughly. We talked about, okay, so who are they going to play? And just to be clear, so everyone knows the scenarios, final weekend of the season, it comes down to this in the Pac-12 North. Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington State, all still in contention. The most straightforward is obviously for the Ducks. They control their fate. If they beat the Beavs, they are in, and they'll get another shot at Utah. Oregon State will win the North if they can beat Oregon, and if Washington wins the Apple Cup. The Cougs are in if they beat the Huskies in the Apple Cup and Oregon State beats Oregon. So it sounds more confusing than it actually is, but my point being that I wouldn't be surprised to see any of those scenarios play out. So let's focus in on Oregon because, again, they're the ones that I think are obviously had a really disappointing weekend, but they still have a ton to play for. What are you expecting to see from Mario's team on Saturday at Adamson in front of a home crowd?
It's a culture game, straight up. We've seen teams that are in contention for the playoff when they lose, right? That is a focus. right? And I know every coach will say it's the next practice or the next game. But as a former player, being in this thing for 20 plus years now with you, Ash, we know that when that dream is taken away, you can get deflated, right? So to me, I'd imagine that culture, and Coach Cristobal said it after the game, he allowed him to be deflated. And then you say, hey, you're playing a rival who beat you last year. You're playing a rival for senior day on your home field in Autzen. And you're playing a rival for a chance to go to the Rose Bowl. And some of these players experienced that game a couple of years ago. We were there when Justin Herbert, of course, won that ball game, and Brady Breeze, and they went off in the Rose Bowl. So there's a lot to play for the Ducks. I can't wait to see how they respond. Like, I really can't wait. And it'll be interesting because is Verone McKinley, we hope he's okay. That's a leader of that team, right? Kayvon Thibodeau, Noah. So we know the names by now. I can't wait to hear from Coach Cristobal about how was practice this week. So I'd imagine it was dialed, much like I'm sure it is on the other side. So I expect to see a great game. I do not expect to see this thing snowball, but they got to stop the run. They have to be the more physical team, and they've got to move the sticks on offense. So there's things to clean up. They picked the worst time for their worst collective game in all phases of the season. I think they'll bounce back, but I think we have an awesome game on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's at 12:30 on ESPN, Oregon State and Oregon. It's looking forward to that. Let's talk briefly about the Beavs, because I think, the season that they've had, and there has been some ups and there has been some downs, but the fact that it's going to come down to they've got a chance to beat their rivals and potentially go play in the Pac-12 championship game, it's special. And I think all my hats off to Jonathan Smith for what he's been able to build there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it now, Kyle Whittingham, Jonathan Smith, Coach of the Year, at least finalists right now, at least according, in my opinion, Ash. When I look at the Beavs, having called a bunch of their games, I did a month straight of Oregon State football this season. And I kept wondering, like, how are they going to handle success as it grows? They've never been there before. And I think they learned some lessons, good ones against Utah, challenging ones against Cal, right? Challenging ones in double overtime against Colorado. And then you looked at them over the weekend against ASU, and they just, again, did what their identity does, which is run the football, stop the run. Or at least as of late, with the change of the defensive coordinator, I mean, they were impressive in that game. So I don't think that this game and what's at stake will be too big, not just because of where we are in 2021, but because of what they did last year. I don't feel from them the big eyes against the Ducks. I don't think they're going to go in there and see the motorcycle and the mascot cruise out on it and lead the team. And then between the third and fourth quarters, see the video on the Jumbotron. I don't see them not being able to handle that one. And I called it a couple of years ago when Oregon went to the Rose Bowl, and you wondered, right? They lost Jake Luton in pregame. There's a lot of things that went on with that team, but they still competed. It was a competitive game. So I think the culture's ready for it. And that's why I do think, again, in our world on the West Coast, we got a championship environment in that rivalry game for a ton at stake. I wouldn't be shocked if they went in there and pulled it off because of the way they play. So the biggest thing will be they have to establish the run. When they do that, Chance Nolan can deal. Saw it last weekend against Arizona State. If they can't run the football, big advantage for the Ducks.
And Trent Bray's defense has looked pretty good in the last couple of weeks since he took that thing over. All right, you and I get to hang out again. Thank goodness. We're going to be in Arizona, Territorial Cup matchup, 1:00 on the Pac-12 network. Tailgate starts going at noon. But I got to ask you, Yogi, Jed Fish had a great line in his press conference about, even though he wasn't the coach last year, he said, we remember 70-7, them going for it, throwing a pass on fourth down late in the game. I mean, there is some obvious no love lost between these two programs, but what are you looking forward to? And do you think that the Wildcats have what it takes to pull the upset on the road?
I do. There's so many elements. Like, this is one of those games, like every rivalry game, where prior to kickoff, there's a lot of dialogue that can happen around this team. Like, there's a billboard on the way up from Tucson to Tempe that I'd imagine Arizona and Jed Fish is going to drive by that has the score of last year's game, right? They're going to have a very clear image and reminder of what happened a year ago under a different staff. When I look at the game, though, and you get to it, ASU, they lost a lot of players last week, right? Multiple players in a car accident after a practice. Their top player on defense Darian Butler did not play after an injury in the UW game. His status is still TBD, as are the players that missed that game a week ago. I think it's going to come down to who's playing, right? Merlin Robertson left the game with an injury, right? Another star linebacker, right? For Jaden Daniels, is it his final game? Like, he's obviously had a ton of success in this rivalry. So I think, yeah, for Arizona, the one thing that we know when you study them is there's no lows. They play hard. Don Brown's last game before he becomes the head coach at UMass, right? The drama just keeps building in this one. So I look at Arizona, if they can stay away, and they haven't done it this season, but if they can stay away from the 2 drives that snowball and become catastrophic, they'll be in this ball game. If those happen, if it's a punt block for a touchdown like we've seen this season, or if it's a couple penalties on a drive in the red zone that just thwarts any opportunity for points, they're not going to win the game. But if they can play clean, man, I think this is going to be a classic game. And I believe that in my heart of hearts. Here we are, Tuesday night. I'm almost done with my prep because I was so excited about it. And I think we're going to get a very competitive ball game. I hope both teams are healthy, but there's a lot of questions still to be answered heading into the game.
Well, I'm excited to be there with you and with our crew. And it's hard to believe that it is the final week of the regular season. This season has felt like a lifetime, but also went by in a blink of an eye. So happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and obviously everyone who joined us for this edition of Pac-12 Happy Hour presented by Dr. Pepper. I will see you in Tempe.